Rick, what's up, baby?
I didn't recognize you, Keith. You've changed so much in the last couple of weeks. What
You
the
look just
hell?
like you look the same,
Yeah,
dude.
the only reason I'm wearing a beret is because I've got crystal gale hair.
I
I got
love it,
wrapped up in a bun on top here.
dude. You look great, man. You look
Yeah.
awesome.
All right. What are you, brother? Yeah, you're in the studio, right?
I'm in the studio. You look like you're ready to go do a jazz set with the Rat Pack. I mean, you look great.
Yeah,
You look great, man.
there's 16 other people back here. We're just jamming out.
Social distancing,
Yeah, social distancing only it's 2 feet instead of six. That's all.
dude. I love it, man.
Uh,
No, Rick, man, dude. Thank you so much, man. I've missed you. I've really missed you.
Keith, we are just talking before the camera turned on, and one of the things that's so cool is that when you have friends and you have good family and everyone is sort of in the same boat, it's like a family of community. There's a sense of real belonging, even though we're not touching, we're not within each other's grasp, but there's this community sense that you have. And I think when we're so happy to be connected, like with Zoom, that it even is greater than when you're when you're in person, in a sense.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's your practice to be able to see the good in what's here and your ability to accept it. A lot of people that I talk to, they're struggling. Like it's not the same, and they bring in these conceived notions, and they have this context about what life has to be like or what a situation has to be like to be perfect for them to be happy. And so for me, I had to go into the whole Zoom thing with like, it's not supposed to be the same. It's going to be different. And once I expected to be different, I was pleasantly surprised. Like, over the years, I worked on lowering my gratitude and my happiness threshold. So, dude, it doesn't take a lot to make me happy. So, I mean, but and people can say that's delusional or you're putting yourself on. But let me tell you what's not happening. I'm not suffering, you know,
That's
because I
absolutely.
don't have this high threshold and I'm not continuing to adjust the goalposts for what takes it to make me happy. So when I get into a virtual spin class, it's the same as having everybody real time physically right here next to me. It's not the same, but I don't expect it to be. So I can suspend that mind and shut it down from talking, and then I can totally like love and totally enjoy the spin experience of looking through a screen. So when you and I, tuned in today, and I saw you, dude, it was like you were right here. I was so happy to see you.
Oh, thanks, buddy. I miss you. I totally agree with all that, by the way. That's well said. And it's a beautiful experience to be able to do something like this with our technology. There's no doubt that humans need other humans for sure. And I know that when we don't have that or we feel we're deprived of it, that creates some real anxiety, some real ambiguous feelings in our hearts. And just to be able to do this with Zoom is fantastic.
Exactly. And this is also part of the practice. And what our topic of our show, for those who tune in to our first Zoom podcast, is, it's in the spirit of that things need to be a certain way for you to be able to become peaceful, to be spiritual, or to be conscious. And our way of thinking, at least our approach, is that whatever shows up is the path, it is the way. So for example, someone said to me, like, you know what, if I didn't have these children at home, I would be able to get some stuff done. Or if the stock market didn't tank with the economy, and right now it's a perfect time with the pandemic, if this wasn't going on, then I could be peaceful. How do you expect me to be peaceful right now? Or how do you expect me to practice meditation or to do those things then, now? And what you and I are big believers in is that whatever shows up, that is the path.
Yes.
Your children, you having to homeschool them now and then try to pull off working from home too, that is the path,
That's true. So it's
No,
so
so,
true. Yeah, that's so
yeah.
true.
So Rick,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the problem that we have is always trying to deal with our expectations, trying to manage our expectations. And the more you fight what the reality is, the more suffering you have. So for example, if you were to look at the pandemic and say, okay, this is an opportunity for me to get caught up on my professional reading, or this is an opportunity for me to read my car manual,
Right.
or become a better cook, or do something that is positive and uplifting, and something that doesn't make you feel like you're trapped and a victim. That's great. That's what you need to do. Now, getting back to the thing with the kids, that's real. You're going to have all kinds of stuff that's different. Kids climbing the walls, fighting, throwing stuff, messing up your house, getting in the way, interrupting you. That's normal, but you have to figure out a strategy around it. It's just logistics. It's just logistics. People think it's their lives. It's just logistics. It's just planning and figuring out how do you get around it. Maybe the husband takes the kids for a while. Maybe you have a nanny that does it remotely, or maybe you have someone who has a class and the kids watch the class. There has to be a way, or maybe it's a way of teaching the kids how to be respectful and not animals, little animals. They're crazy, like my little guy used to be. I mean, those are all things you just have to sit back and say, okay, how can I, this is uncomfortable. I'm unsure of where I'm at, but how in the world can I figure out, of all the possibilities in the world that has ever been and that are now available to me, what can I do? That kind of possibility thinking we don't do, because we kind of shut down once we get to the point, oh, this is hard. Oh, this is a pain. I'm not doing this. This is awful. When you get to that point, it's hard to get your way out of that.
Yeah, I completely agree, Rick. You know, like there are people will say, well, you don't know my kids. I don't know your kids, but here's what I do know. If you want to be right about your presence of your kids making it impossible for you to be peaceful, okay.
That's right.
That's okay. I'm gonna let you have that.
You'll be right.
I'm not here to, exactly. I'm not here to argue with you or convince you or persuade you. I'm just here to just show you one other possibility, that whatever's in front of you is the opening. It is the way. You can want it to be different, but it's not different. That's it. And for those out there, it's like, well, kids aren't my issue. You fill in the blank of what your thing is that's in the way, whether it's a stock market, to where it's being unemployed, to whether it's health or illness, or heaven forbid, a loved one fighting for their life right now. Whatever that is, it's all the opening. It's all the access to go deeper. And you see people around you do it all the time, if you're conscious. But most time we're unconscious. Speaking from my own experience, I had people around me all the time that were like peaceful. Rick, I couldn't even see him. I was like, this dude, who's this nut? He's not in touch with reality.
Yeah, that's what you think, right?
She was more in touch with reality than I could ever possibly imagine being back then. And then I've had so much suffering that I was like, oh, this is the path. You know, okay, you're going to furlough me from work? Oh, without pay? That's the path. Okay, I can't, and I don't even get down in the weeds about, well, I only got 3 months or 3 weeks or 3 days worth of living expenses. In this moment, I'm okay. And life is only made of this moment. And so I really try to work on that. But it's been this commitment to see however life shows up in this moment as a practice that is really serving me well right now. What about you?
Yes, exactly. The practice is hugely important. Let me say one thing that I want to expand on, something that you said that I think is really important. You can't ever change the circumstance. We've been through this many times before. You can never change the circumstance, whether it's big stuff like a pandemic or little stuff like, I missed an appointment. But you can't change the circumstance. You can only change your attitude toward it. But you also have tools at your disposal, but you have to get past your outrage about having to use the tools.
That's right.
You have to get past the idea that I shouldn't have to be doing this, because
Right.
if you can't get past that, you're going to continue to suffer. So let me give you an example of what I think is really important for humans, and that's especially older people. And I'm talking about people past like 20, not just old guys like me. You have to be flexible. There has to be a way of looking at life like you'd look at, let's say, you and I played sports. If you're playing defense and you're a cornerback and you've got a guy to cover, you don't know which way he's going to break. That's kind of the fun of the game, right? You know, you're going to pit yourself against him. You're going to watch if he's going to do a square in, you're going to follow him the inside foot. You're going to be on the outside if he's going to do a square out. You know, you've got all these things going on, but out of the box, you're just waiting before that snap for something to happen. And once it happens, then you start rolling with it. You don't say, oh, phew, he made a left turn. I was going right. God dang. You know, I mean, that's the sport of it. Okay. I don't mean to minimize the importance of the difficulties that we have, but I do think that we tend to get overblown on what our limitations are. We tend to focus more on what our limits are rather than what our possibilities are. So I'll give you a quick example of how I learned this the hard way as a young lawyer. My first case in the Supreme Court, in Arizona, not US, Arizona Supreme Court, I was very nervous. I was probably maybe a 5-year lawyer. And I had all of my arguments I had prepared. I'd worked very diligently on it. I wrote the brief, rewrote the brief, rewrote the brief, rewrote the brief. And then I did as much of the preparation, reading every case, every dissent, everything I could possibly think that I could be asked. Okay, so I get up to the Supreme Court. You've got all of these justices, and they're sitting way, way up. It's like a temple, and you have to look up to see them. And you get this feeling that you're just this little mouse, and when you're only a 5-year lawyer, you think you don't know anything, which is probably true. So the argument starts, and I'm starting to feel a little comfortable. I'm making my points, making my points, making my points. Finally, Judge Struckmeyer, a very quiet guy, but never asks questions, asked me a question. And he said, well, what about, if your argument is that, what about this? And I said, well, Justice Struckmeyer, I'm going to come to that a little later in my argument. And I started to go on. And he said, son, you're there now. Now, the point is, you can have all these great plans, but the reality is you're there now. Whatever it is that shows up, that's your practice now. If you need to deal with something with your children or your ex-husband or your finances, you're there now. So start using those tools and stop having a judgment about it. If you have the judgment, you can't use the tools. Get rid of the damn judgment, solve the problem. Again, it's the flexibility and the mindfulness that you know that you can do anything. You have literally an arsenal of tools at your disposal, and they're all mental and emotional and psychological. And you just have to engage them. If you're stuck on being a victim, it can't happen.
No, Rick, I completely agree. Thank you for that example, because I was right there in the courtroom with you as you shared that. And
I lost an argument, by the
way. I'm not surprised, and I'm not surprised not because of your skill set, because you're incredibly talented, but more so because like you had a game plan going in, and the judge did an audible, and so you were like, "What do I do here?" And when I think about the sports metaphor that you gave, which was outstanding, why are the athletes who really perform well at the highest level, what is it about them that knows that, okay, I'm just going to play this position, I'm going to stay fluid in my hips and my feet, and if he breaks this way, it becomes second nature that they break the same way, or they're within a millisecond of doing the exact same move to cover or defend the other athlete. How do they get that good? Practice. That's how they get good. They get practice. But when it comes to applying that to other areas to where you don't have practice, you're inexperienced, particularly when the ego takes over and makes the enemy of life or situations or tells you that things aren't fair, we completely forget that practice can make that whole situation at the least tolerable. At the most, it can make it a pleasant experience where it's just learning. But we forget to apply that. What happened to me was, I remember all the suffering stuff, and I still thought it was a disconnect. Okay, I'm so disciplined at getting up every morning, eating a certain way, working out a certain way, that is second nature for me. So I'm hardly ever tripped up about it. But when you take that to applying it to a relationship, to where there's light show goes on, there's egos, there's people slugging it out and metaphorically punching each other. And like it's hard to believe that these people actually loved each other at one time. When you're in the throes of that, or getting told that a loved one is sick, or you've lost your job, whatever the case, you forget that's an opportunity for practice. But what the great athletes remember, or the great inventors, what they remember is, oh, it's going to be at least 10,000 prototypes before I get this thing nailed down and master this. And the athlete's like, okay, I keep falling for that move. Let me look at the game film. Why do I keep biting on the, oh man, I'm tipping my pitches, or I'm doing this. Like you can do it there. But here, when it comes to the ego makes you think that all those tools, they don't work on this problem. They work on this problem. They work on this problem.
You're so right, Keith. That's beautiful. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And the other thing I think that we need to keep in mind is that life really is like that. What the athlete does, what the competent worker does, what the competent lawyer, doctor, housewife, mother, whatever the competence is of that's required for that work, you don't think of it as something that's very difficult. You just do it. But when we get into a situation that's outside of our comfort zone, then all of that stuff starts coming. Like, I'm a failure, or I never can deal with this, or I'm weak and I can't get to it, or it's a pain in the neck, I don't want to do it. Those are the things that are obstacles, but the key, self-created. They're self-created. They're not real. They're a story you're telling yourself. So
Absolutely.
The practice is always about being flexible, being willing to accept the circumstance without suffering and without judging, and then creating whatever options that you have based on all of humanity, whatever humanity's experienced. You think there haven't been pandemics before? 50 million people were killed in 1918.
Yes.
We know every human problem, every human circumstance has been done thousands, millions of times since humanity began. So think of that. These are things that people can cope with, and you have it within you to do it. And I'm not just talking about the pandemic. I'm talking about things like solving financial issues, stuff that bothers us a lot, relationship with a kid that isn't working out so well, husband who feels like he doesn't love you or is withholding love, anything like that, same tools. Anyway, the point is flexibility, accepting the circumstance, and enjoying the practice. The practice is the deal, not the circumstance. The circumstance is going to come and go. If it's not a pandemic, it's going to be Aunt Lucy dying, or it's going to be the stock market breaking, or the 401k is blown out. It's always going to be something. So you might as well get the practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree. And people, and the tools, they travel well. They're completely transferable. A Phillips head screwdriver will unscrew that type of screw every single time. Like it will. And people are like, well, my significant other isn't letting me be heard, or they're not listening to me. You give up expecting them to. Like seriously, you just give that up. Why do I keep experiencing this? Because you keep using the wrong tool for this situation, although you know the right tool to use. And so once you give that up, I mean, the peace is beautiful, man. And for me, I am just so above anything else, man. It's the peace. That's what I'm about. I'm about that peace. And with that, there's everything to help create the situation to experience peace, the gratitude, the commitment to service, the kindness, acceptance, all of that just kinds of, just really helps me. But you have to be with that. It's the practice. And when you can make it solely about the practice, about the journey, you don't experience suffering. Anything that shows up, you're like, okay, this is what is. Now, could you have a preference for something else? Absolutely. But if that preference isn't what's in front of you right now, if that's not what is, then accept what is, and then you got peace.
The bottom line is it's just easier to ride the horse in the direction he's going instead of fighting the horse all the time. Keith, I wanted to acknowledge you. As you were speaking, I was thinking of something that somebody from ToBeRe, and I don't remember who, this is years before when I first joined the group. Your transformation has been remarkable. I mean, from coming from a Marine background, strongly disciplined, not having much patience for people who didn't follow a certain rigid way, and to where you are now, which is all about kindness and understanding and service and peace and letting things go and being very mellow. The person that mentioned this to me, and I don't remember who, said, the thing that I'm really attracted to about Keith is I want to be like him because I think he can handle whatever shows up. And I said, well, so can you. And they said, no, no, really, I can't. I don't have what he has. And I said, yes, you do. You just need to customize it to your particular circumstance, just like he did. He didn't show up out of the cradle that way. He got, 2x4 over the head several times, got a lot of stitches, and was in the hospital for a while. Figure.
Yes.
So there's a pain that comes with the suffering. I should say that pain that comes with the transformation, just like a physical transformation. You're hungry sometimes, your muscles are sore, you don't want to go to the gym, but if you do it, there's a payoff. Same thing with the practice.
Yeah. Rick, thank you so much.
Well, you are an inspiring dude. I really appreciate it. I don't care much for your taste in masks, though. I think it's a little weird.
No, Rick, thank you so much, man, for those kind words. I was that way for a long time, extremely disciplined, rigid in my ways. And if I didn't tell people that they should be the same way or that they should have some level of discipline, it was certainly communicated in the energy in which I exuded around people or towards them. And I just got to the point, man, where I was suffering so much, and I got really clear that other people weren't causing me the suffering. The situation, the circumstances weren't. I was doing it. I was creating external enemies by not accepting how people showed up, what their behaviors were, and not owning my role, which was the only role in creating the suffering that I was experiencing. It was no one else. My significant other doesn't appreciate me, doesn't acknowledge me. I'm creating that. Like, whether they do or not, they're showing up however they show up, and you cannot outbehave your current level of consciousness. And
right.
So I stopped letting other people's behavior impact me, because if they were kind, it's because they practiced being kind. They were conscious of being kind. And if they weren't kind, it's because they were unconscious. All the things that I did, I would say 99% of it came out of being unconscious. Whether I was unfaithful in relationships, I was unconscious. Now, did I understand that, hey, this is not a good thing? Yeah, otherwise I wouldn't have done it in secret. But there's a difference of understanding it, cognitively, understanding it mentally, that what you're doing is harmful to others. That's different from a deep conscious part of it, to where you can control those impulses, where you can control that behavior. So I needed to get to the point to where I could exert control over my behavior and go beyond my biological impulses. And so somebody could say, well, I do that naturally, you do it in the area of fidelity, but do you do it in the area of blaming your partner, or making them the enemy, of creating enemies of the behavior, or of expecting them to be different? Until you control all of that, you can't speak about what other people can do or don't do well. So I just sum it up as, when I'm at my best, I'm completely conscious. I have no complaints whatsoever. There are no external enemies. When I'm not doing that, I'm unconscious.
That's so beautiful, Keith. That's great. That you could just take that clip and post it, and then we can do something else, go garden or something. Because really, that's the ball game right there. One thing that really helped me was the idea of trying to go a whole day. And if you can't go a whole day, go half day. If you can't go half day, try 1 hour. Try 1 hour of just not ever blaming or considering that why you're unhappy or sad is related to anything outside of yourself. Try that for just 1 hour.
Amen.
If you just started and said, okay, today is a clean slate. I'm just going to pretend, you can trick yourself. I'm just going to pretend that I'm the cause of all my problems. So when someone cuts me off in traffic, yeah, it's because I was going too slow. If someone says, you're a jerk, you didn't clean up your towel on the floor. Yep, I left my towel on the floor. In other words, get rid of the ego for just 1 hour that's always defending you and making the other person wrong. Get rid of that for just an hour or a half a day or a day. It's unbelievable how freeing that is. When you start taking responsibility for every damn thing that occurs to you, you interpret as an obstacle, you'll start seeing, man, this whole thing is just a configuration of my consciousness, my unconsciousness, my willing to be a victim. And if you can get rid of that, you don't suffer anymore, or at least it's minimized.
Yeah, I completely agree, man. So, back to just to put a bow on this show, For people to say things like, if these children weren't home or acting the way they were, or if my spouse did this, or if I didn't lose my job, I would be able to be peaceful. Keith, you're very fortunate. I mean, we hear people talk
Yeah.
about Tim, who's a
Yeah.
great friend of ours, all the time about how easy he's got it. And man, because he shows up kind and he shows up like he's just in a very positive space all the time. But you and I, we know Tim well because we're vulnerable with each other. We know some of the situations and some of the things that have been dealt his way in his life regarding his family. And dude, on paper, you would never say that dude is lucky and he's got it easy. But because of his practice, it looks easy. And all the great ones, the athletes that are poetry in motion, Rick, practice, man, a lot of reps, and it's that way. And you're the same way. When you tell me something, I'm just like, dude, anybody else would have been broken by that. Your practice, man.
Yeah, baby, it's a great thing. It's like a key. It's available to everyone. It's nothing. You're already equipped to do it. If the folks could just get to it, they would suffer so much less and be much happier and much more peaceful inside.
You're so right. So Rick, we'll close here, man. And I love you, man.
Hey, I love you too. Now, let me ask you something really quick.
Oh God. God. Yes, please do.
Yeah. Now, have you gone? Are you eating meat now because of the pandemic?
No, I'm still plant-based.
Holy, don't you get tired of, like, what do you have, like beans and rice every day, 3 times a day with a
beans,
little
rice, lentils, Brussels sprouts, spinach,
Man.
the stuff that you grow in your garden.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's why you need to get up here. And
I do.
I'm just teasing you about your diet. I love your discipline, and that's so healthy. That's a great way to go.
Thank you, buddy. I love you, man.